Okay, so Trent gets to talk about the exciting stuff, and I'm going to talk about the really, really boring stuff tonight, which is really interesting to me. So hopefully some of you will agree. So generally when we talk about AI, we talk about the big picture stuff, the crazy philosophical questions, like what does it mean to be human? And what does it mean to make artificial life? And will it want to rise up and crunch our skulls? But with the AI that we're playing with today, the stuff that we're starting to see emerging in day-to-day life, we need to ask the boring questions. We need to figure out the laws around this. Like how will we make law and policy and governance work with AI? So one of the questions that comes up here is jobs. We see a lot of concern that automation is going to come and decimate employment. So, or at least some people think that. Trump's new labor secretary seems to think it won't be a problem. He's not at all worried about it. He says it'll be another 50 to 100 years before we have to start thinking about AI and automation affecting employment in any way. So I think he's dangerously wrong. We're already seeing stuff like this. Notice anything about that dump truck there? It doesn't have a driver. So, well, we might not be seeing self-driving cars cruising around out in the street in Berlin, although they are in some places. In places where you don't need to have licenses, you can automate as much as you want. And mining companies around the world are already starting to use these trucks. So you imagine a loop of trucks coming to pick up the dirt from this digger, and where you had 4 jobs, now you just have 1. And it goes well beyond just self-driving vehicles. We're going to start seeing AI applied for things like drone delivery. And this will impact hundreds of thousands, millions of jobs. And it's not going to take 50 to 100 years for that to happen. But AI won't take my job. Most of the people in this room don't have anything to worry about, right? Because you're doing more creative stuff. But we've already seen that chess has fallen, and we tend to have this thing where AI is just the stuff that comes next. It's the stuff that computers can't do yet. So for a while it was Jeopardy, and then that was an AI thing, and then it was Go, and that was an AI thing again, as Trent was talking about. And as we've seen more recently, AI is starting to come for what is clearly the crowning achievement in human creativity and competition, which is StarCraft. And that should be beat by AI pretty soon. Lawyers are safe, though, so I'm kind of worried as well. And we'll be hearing more tonight about creativity and machine intelligence, which should be pretty interesting. The next question that people come up with is liability. So what happens when my smart car self-drives itself over a baby? So this is, again, not a hypothetical question. This is already happening. This is an Uber self-driving car on its side. There's some question whether it was driving itself at the time. Uber says no, but they have a not-so-great reputation with being honest with government employees. So we're waiting to get the data from the dashboard on that one. But it is something we'll start to need to think about. Like, how do we decide who is responsible if an AI runs over someone or causes a car accident? So that's not to say that AIs are bad drivers. Humans are even worse, even at really low speeds. But these accidents are starting to happen, and we need to have a way to deal with it. So when we're writing the software that guides self-driving cars, we have to program in all kinds of decisions. Like if it can steer off the road and kill one person instead of running into a school bus, should it do that? If it has to kill the driver to drive off a bridge instead of driving into that school bus, should it do that? That's kind of a branch of philosophical questions known as the Trolley Problem. It has all kinds of interesting derivatives if you look for it on the internet. For example, for $1, I'll promise to pull the lever and force the trolley to hit the other people if you're one of the people that it might kill. Which seems like a good joke when it's the black hat in XKCD. maybe not so good a joke when it's an executive from Mercedes-Benz who said it, which he did last fall. He said that the ultimate priority would be protecting the driver of the car. So if you're rich enough to afford Mercedes-Benz, then you'll be safe, and the school bus or the stroller maybe not so much. Another question that I like to think about is intellectual property. So what about creative stuff that machines produce? Right now, copyright law says that the rights go to the creator, the author of a work. But what about cases where a human isn't the creator? So we have some experience from that from the past few years. There have been a number of legal battles over this monkey selfie. So out in the field, a nature photographer had his camera snatched, and this monkey decided that he was going to play with it a bit and wound up taking some really quite amazing shots, including this one. So quickly after that, a bunch of magazines decided that they wanted to have that picture in it, and they just ran the picture. They didn't bother talking to the photographer. They didn't bother licensing it. They just printed the picture, and the photographer was not pleased with that. He decided that he was going to sue the magazines and reestablish his copyright. And the court actually said, no, you don't have a copyright in that image. It wasn't created by you. It was created by the monkey. So just because you own the equipment doesn't mean you own the copyright. And then there was a second lawsuit over this by PETA, the animal rights group, trying to not only say that the photographer didn't have the copyright, but that the monkey did. And the court wasn't quite ready for that one. They said there is no copyright in the image. So for now, monkeys can't have copyright. Another question is contracts. So just like in IP, who is the person entering into a contract? So under existing laws, only legal persons can enter into copyright. That's either a natural person or a legal person created by law, like a corporation or an organization of another type. So robots right now have a very hard time entering into contracts. Although to be fair, they aren't the only ones who have a hard time with handshakes. So we have to think about how to create policy around this stuff. The European Parliament is actually way out in front of the rest of the world on this, with their super catchy report called the Draft Report with Recommendations to the Commission on Civil Law Rules on Robotics from the Committee on Legal Affairs. It's a terrific read. I recommend everyone check it out if you're having trouble sleeping. But I actually did quite enjoy it. So first they considered liability. They're really worried about who is going to take responsibility in the event that an AI messes something up, which is going to happen. I mean, it's not a matter of if this will happen, it's a when. We've already seen these accidents involving self-driving cars. We're going to see people killed by self-driving cars. So here's what they recommended. They started out with a special insurance. When I say robot here too, by the way, I mean AI and robot. They just use the language robot throughout. So a special insurance for robot manufacturers that they'll have to get to protect their purchasers. Another suggestion was that each robot would need to maintain its own insurance. That sounds interesting since they can't enter into contracts, but basically the idea is that if your machine is making money, it'll have to pay into an insurance pool that would protect the general public. And we'll also need a robot registry, so we can easily tell not only who manufactured the AI, but also who is running it and what they've done to run it. Because we'll also have disputes over, well, you manufactured it, but then you set it to work in a specific way, or you trained it on the cat data set instead of the dog data set, and therefore caused injury to the dogs. So there will be all of these questions, and we need a registry to track down who is doing what and who is kind of affecting the intelligence of the AI. So this is also very interesting. This is the way that they put it. There would be a sliding scale of liability that would be proportionate to the actual level of instructions given to the robot and its autonomy. So the more independence that a robot has, the less liability the creators or the programmers would have for it. Or if the robot has a lot of learning capability and it's been out of your hands for a while and just picking up its own data from the rest of the world. So, for example, if you didn't teach it to hit children, but it's learned that a lot of children will come up and kick it and interrupt its routine, and it suddenly learns that the easy way around this to continue on its cleaning mission is just to swat any child that gets in its way, you might not be responsible for that. What about intellectual property? So this is another area that was really picked up by the EU. They said that the criteria for intellectual creation for copyrightable works produced by computers or robots should be drawn up, which doesn't say much about how it actually will be drawn up, but it shows that they're aware of the question and that they're really thinking about how these AIs should be able to own the creations that they produce. And it wouldn't be surprising to see it be something like this previous criteria, proportionate to the amount of independence that it has. So if it is simply taking an image that you give it and spitting out something that's very close, then like putting it through the Google Deep Dream algorithm to make it one of those nightmare tentacle dog creatures that everyone has seen, that might not be so creative and owning its own rights. But if it's doing something from scratch and completely generating a new image based on its own learnings, then maybe that should be owned by the AI. And finally, the biggest question, personhood. And I think that's the biggest one of all. So the European Commission said, or the European Parliament said, the most sophisticated autonomous robots could be established as having the status of electronic persons with specific rights and obligations, which is so far out beyond what any other legal body has even looked at doing. This is the kind of thing that PETA was looking for when they asked for the copyright to be assigned to the monkey. This is a really long way along recognizing AIs as life forms or even as persons in the sense of the law. So it's really interesting for legal liability and for all of these legal questions, but also for people who are concerned about AIs or animals having rights. One thing that the EC didn't look at is discrimination. And this, I think you could look at Trent's slide on credit cards for a really good example for how this could work. Sometimes we can't see the patterns that exist in these enormous data sets, but we might come back with results that reinforce or reestablish biases that we don't want to have. For example, the data coming back that it's a bad idea for a bank to lend to a predominantly black neighborhood. You could quite easily see how that could work just because of kind of systemic problems that are now being reinforced by the AI making decisions. And I think that's something we're also going to have to be very wary of going forward. But for now, we can look forward to AIs making policy and ruling over all of us. But for now, we're going to learn about AI creativity. That's all from me for now. So I guess what we were going to do for the agenda, Carly?
Do you have any questions for Greg?
Yeah. Or for Trent, I guess.
Well, Trent's going to have part two
right.
after. So if there are questions for Greg, we can. Yeah.
So what's the repercussion for an AI if they do something wrong? Do we shut them down? Do we kill them?
Right now, nothing. There'd be
so if they're liable, what's the consequence? Do we make them pay?
Right. So under the proposals that this EU body is looking at, there were several different proposals. Right. There was the insurance fund that might be able to remedy things, and that ranges from a pool where people pay money into, and you make a claim against the pool, or for a significantly advanced AI that it would have to carry its own insurance and have its own legal responsibility. So in that case, then the AI would have to pay. But of course, none of this is law yet. This is just recommendations on how to reform the law.
Yeah, I do understand that. But like, for example, Like, how do you shut down a machine that is killing children? Like, do you shut them down? So what happens? Or is there any recommendation for how to avoid future danger?
They didn't get quite that far. They didn't. I don't think they were envisioning a serial killer robot. They were more thinking of like a lawnmower robot that's causing accidental harm. I think when we get to the stage that we would have to worry about AIs causing deliberate harm, that's
it's not deliberate, but like something. Who is responsible for changing the algorithm so that that doesn't happen anymore? If and when it's based on some.
Yeah, that's a good question. If it's the manufacturer, maybe they would have to push a software update. If it's the robot that's responsible, then hopefully it'll have the smarts to change its own. Or maybe we'll have to forcibly shut it down.
Or robot jail.
Yeah.
Robot jail.
Yeah.
Greg,
Unplug it. Yes.
I have a question. I mean, I'm actually pretty shocked about the last thing you showed. That you're thinking of personal rights and obligations and so on. Because essentially, if robots have rights like staying alive, just shutting them off, flicking the switch, is actually murder, kind of.
I don't.
Second question in that context, even an update is basically you're killing the existing thing and getting reincarnation of the maybe additional features. That's so weird. I mean, like seriously.
Yeah, I don't think they thought it through that far to the science fiction conclusions. I mean, I think many people in this room, if not everyone, would see that coming. I don't think that they have thought it that far ahead. I think they were looking at how can we have autonomous robots operating in a way that doesn't create unlimited legal liability for the companies that produce them. How can we have things that are, like for the copyright questions, how can we create a person that has a legal way to act in the world? I don't think they were thinking of actually giving human rights to non-humans at this point. But that is kind of the logical consequence of that first step of calling them a person.
I mean, if they have rights, they don't have rights to live. That's kind of weird as well.
Can they own property? Can they become rich?
Right now, no. Under these proposals, they, in theory, could. I mean, they could own an insurance policy on themselves.
It's a question.
They could own intellectual property.
In the kitchen, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
I think it would be prudent to code in something like a hard kill switch, even though it is technically cruel. But my question is, so you've had a couple of incidents where, okay, like that robot that was running away from that Russian lab, but powered down in the middle of the street because it ran out of battery.
No, but I want to hear about this.
So there's been a couple of times where there was a robot that had been programmed with AI, escaped the lab, and was trundling off down the street before its battery ran out.
Short circuit?
No, it just ran out of battery. It was just running away.
No, I
from
meant
the
the film.
Right? And also you've had other times where AIs have created their own sub-language to communicate data more effectively. What do you think is the furthest ahead we are currently? What projects have you seen demonstrates like the highest level of intelligence that you've seen?
That would be a better question, I think, for Trent.
I'm hiding here. Maybe we can offline that. It's a super deep rabbit hole, right? So
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are there any plans about like an API for controlling AIs? Like the kill switch is actually going that direction. Like if you have an autonomous car and he's driving too fast, or she, what does the police do? Driving behind and say, hey, please stop? Will it respond? What's going on there?
I haven't seen any actual legal stuff around that. I know that Elon Musk has his Coalition for Safe AI, and he's dumped, I think, $1 billion into establishing this research team to create what he calls safe AI. But that's nothing compared to what Google and Facebook and Amazon are putting into AI. I guess no, nothing yet.
Quick question.
Mhm.
So was the opposite of like as the more autonomous a robot is, the more the less liability there is from the part of the manufacturer or human beings. So was the opposite considered? The more autonomous or the more intelligent the robot is, the more liability there is on the part of the human beings.
I think
Did they consider this in this report?
not from what's written in the report. I don't know if they did in the actual meetings, but I think the idea was in law there's kind of this notion that in order to be held responsible for something, you have to be there has to be a very direct link between you and the harm that was caused. It has to be the kind of harm that you could imagine being caused. So, if you produced a lawnmower robot and it goes out and learns how to build arms that have chainsaws and goes around slicing people up with those, there's no way you could have seen that coming. So you can't be held responsible for that.
That's the root of my question, because I think it could be argued that the learning stemmed from the human intelligence. The algorithms that make it possible for the machine to learn were invented not by the machine but by human beings.
We might decide that it's too dangerous to create machines that can learn in unpredictable ways, and we might decide that then we want to regulate that sort of technology on top.
Yeah.
But that's not really where this report was going. Yeah.
So should your chainsaw lawnmower robot pull the lever or not?
Should it?
Pull the lever for the trolley direction. I mean, that would be the basic question. That's curious.
Give them all the trolley problem and see what happens?
Yeah. What do you think?
I think it would just kill all of them. It would look for maximum. Yep.
I've read that researchers try to limit the data that AIs can have access to, so not giving them all the internet, but just small pieces, in order to limit their maybe, I don't know, understanding. So is there a legal discussion about, are you actually entitled to limit an AI? It's like fencing on a child and giving only some books and not everything.
Yeah, that would be back under the human rights for non-humans category, and I don't think they're quite there yet, but I really do think it's something they will have to wrestle with eventually. I think that's it.
Any more questions? So I realized I gave really terrible introductions. Greg is the co-founder and executive director of IPDB, and Trent, who we'll hear more of part 2, is CTO and co-founder of BigchainDB. We'll take a quick break, so grab a drink or some more pizza provided by our lovely hosts here at Blue Yard, and then we'll hear part 2 of Trent's, followed by Terra Zero. So thanks everyone.